Oh, baby. Welcome back to another spectacular episode of OC and TJ. We're halfway through our division previews. Shocking. We are talking about the NFC East, also known as the NFC Least, also known as the NFC Beast. And the reason why I say that is because there has not been a repeat winner of this division since 2004 when the Philadelphia Eagles took control of it in 2003 and 2004. But before we get into all of that, it's OC, it's my buddy TJ. What's going on?
Not much. Colin and I were just talking about his team before we went live. But now we get to talk about the NFC East. We'll get to Colin's team, but we're underway with training camp. So NFL, we're getting there, man. It's getting here. But
Yep.
yeah, a lot of stuff going on with training camp. The Madden, there's been NCAA
Yeah.
video game coming out that I haven't gotten a chance to play it yet, but I've heard it's
I haven't even
pretty
bought
fun.
it.
Yeah. So
Madden ratings came out. Sorry, go ahead, man.
the Madden ratings came out for at least some of the positions too. So interested to see who's overrated and underrated. So that should be fun to look at too. But yeah.
I get the Twitter notifications all the time. I don't know if you follow this account, 32 Beat Writers. Literally, all they do, at least during the offseason, I don't know what they do when the season actually starts. They pretty much post like every single training camp report from all the beat guys. So I've been seeing a lot of clips on Twitter from like all across the league. And obviously, there are a lot of highs, a lot of lows, such as Daniel Jones overthrowing a screen pass or Mac Jones throwing a freaking interception to a scout team safety. But obviously, there have been some positives and unfortunately a lot of lows that included some season-ending injuries and a Danico Autry suspension. But we'll save some time for that near the end of the show if we have time. For now, I think it's time we get into the NFC East and see who we think is going to come out on top and who will unfortunately be on the outside looking in. So let's start right at the top with the Dallas Cowboys. And I think it's pretty fitting that I'm wearing this shirt.
Yeah.
This flag, considering that the Cowboys still proclaim themselves to be America's team. But I'm not going to take the 2-minute drill on this one. That is going to be reserved for TJ. So fire away.
I don't even know where to start on the Dallas Cowboys. They are a very interesting team considering the offseason they had. I mean, actually, 12-5 last year yet again, third straight season. So it's like, you can't really get too mad at that if you're a Cowboys fan. But the way you go out, I mean, losing to one of the youngest teams in NFL history in the Green Bay Packers with their quarterback, who is now the highest paid quarterback or highest paid player of all time in NFL history. So that's pretty. I mean, a lot of that was probably because of that playoff win where he dominated the Cowboys and their, very turnover dependent defense. But, if you don't turn the ball over, you'll be able to pick them apart. So, and I think that's kind of what the Cowboys will try to avoid this season with bringing in Mike Zimmer and Dan Quinn on the way out. But before you get in the defense, you have to talk about the offense. Dak Prescott, you know who he is, right? Like he's not in that elite class, but last season he was runner up at MVP. So, he really showed that he's not like just like some average quarterback. He's a great quarterback, but I think in the playoff games he's shown he just really can't string together 3 to 4 straight games of really good play. So, but he's got the talent around him, weapons like CeeDee Lamb, top 3 wide receiver in football. Brandon Cooks still a great number 2, even though, he might not be what he once was. He's still really good. And then you got, say what you want about the Cowboys, but they know how to develop their offensive line. So they drafted Tyler Guyton. Tyler Smith is an all-pro. You move in. He's in the inside, playing amazing at guard. You lose Tyron Smith, but, I think I trust the Cowboys' ability to draft linemen. Terrence Steele's pretty good, and, this offense is good. I don't really – there's really no issue, you'd say, with this offense. The running game, sure, but Zeke wasn't bad when he was with the Pats last year. So, definitely on the not what he once was a few years, like 6 to 7 years ago. But, offense, I don't have major issues with. The defense it has some really good star players, but the depth is definitely not where you want it. DeMarcus Lawrence definitely on the downswing of career, even though he's still a good player. But Mozzie Smith, you want to see more from him in his second season. He was a former first round pick, and then you got obviously the big men, Micah and Trayvon Diggs, who's coming off the season-ending injury, but I expect him to be back better. So, and then you got Darrell Bland, who had a pretty good season last year, and other good guys in the secondary like Jordan Wilson and blanking on who else is in their safety room. But yeah, they didn't really make too many splashes on the defense like we expected. But I still think this is overall the best roster in the NFC East, despite their kind
Really?
of deficiencies in the. Oh yeah, I think by far. I think I think just based on their defense, like their defense has way more star players than any of the. Combined with the fact they have a good offense, like I think they're the most well-rounded. I'll say that. So, yeah, I still think this is a good team. How they do in the playoffs, though, is definitely always going to be interesting with the Cowboys because you never know. They always seem to, not show up prepared. So, or I don't know, but that would be what I would say about the Cowboys. Honestly, they're a pretty good roster, but it really just comes down to what they do in the playoffs. So,
Yeah, their offseason cycle is really frustrating, which is do nothing in free agency, wait till the draft to get your best players, piss somebody off or two players off with contract holdouts that take way too long for them to get figured out, start the season, do pretty well, win about 12 games, delude fans into thinking that this is different than any year prior, and then in January, they just completely choke. So I don't really think you missed anything. The offense, even without Tony Pollard, it still should have a solid passing attack and a dynamic offensive line, especially since they have their center and Zeke back. So I think that's going to be a huge plus. Defensively, even with Mike Zimmer, taking charge, he's going to want to have guys that can really generate enough pressure. He wants a lot of size. He wants guys that could really attack the run and make sure that they're generating enough pressure as they can. So that way that the secondary can follow suit and make sure that they're doing their jobs. Obviously, Stephon Gilmore hasn't signed with anybody. So this is going to be a huge year for Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs because he's coming off a season-ending knee injury. But I expect them to be a playoff caliber team. And who knows? They definitely have a shot of ending that streak where a repeat division winner hasn't been crowned since 2004. But at the same time, I mean, really since 2021, since 2021, the Cowboys have been pretty much up and down when it comes to their offensive production. 2021, they're near the top of the league. 2022, not so much. And a lot of that was because of Dak getting hurt, but at the same time, they were just not really that much more dynamic. And in 2023, they rose back to the top again. And in 2024, it's up for them to decide which path they're going to go. They're either going to stay consistent and be a top 10 offense in the league, or they're just going to not change anything and they'll just stay middle of the pack. Honestly, given the fact that CD and Dak are hoping to get huge contracts that are supposed to reset the market, I don't know if they're going to be able to live up to that. If they do, at least with Dak getting a second contract at $60 million a year, but we'll find out. I think they should make the playoffs with this roster. They should, or else Mike McCarthy's gone, Dak is gone. They're pretty much going to have a mini fire sale if they don't. But yeah. It's the Cowboys. To quote Stephen A. Smith, whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
That's how it's been, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if you saw. Did you see Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones' press conference? What in God's name were they talking about?
I mean, I honestly, I didn't even watch it because it was just like I saw parts of it, like parts of what Jerry was saying, but I try and tune out what they're saying because sometimes they dig themselves in their own hole.
Exactly.
I think a lot of it had to do with them just trying to figure out just kind of backtrack on what they're doing with Dak, CD, and Micah. But I mean, I never take what they say seriously, or at least to heart too much.
I mean, I didn't watch the whole session, but when I saw that he tried to compare himself to Patrick Mahomes when when explaining why it's smart to take your time before extending a player. Like, he's like, I'm an option quarterback. I got to make sure I have the pitch. I got to make sure I have the throw. I got to take my time and see what my options are before I can make the right decision. It sounds like Patrick Mahomes, right? Well, it
Yeah.
does. I'm like, dear Lord, this is not going to
Yeah.
end well, which is why I'm not that optimistic on the Cowboys. It's not even the fact that they don't have a great running game. It's just that every single time that you think that they're going to achieve different strides, they literally end in the same different traps. You're either losing to the 49ers or you lose to a team that plays hard to get and is, playing like they have nothing to lose. And he once again reiterated that he was all in, but he didn't really explain that he was all in on going on these contract extensions. He was just like, yeah, I don't really, I can give these guys the money, but I don't really want to do that right now. That was essentially what he was saying.
Yeah. No, they got to get it done. I mean, at least with CD and Micah, figure out Dak later, but these got to get done. So
I don't know why he does this every year, where it's just you wait to the last minute when everybody else gets their contract extensions, and then he has his own players that want their money, and Jerry just says, "Ah, crap. Well, I guess we're in another stalemate. We got to figure this out sooner or later, or else our TV ratings are going to go down the tubes once again," which, honestly, it's not too far off. But let me ask you this. Since we're talking about Dak and CD and Micah Parsons, we've had this conversation before, like who you would prioritize giving a contract extension to first. I said Micah Parsons. I think, did you say him too, or did you say CD Lamb?
I mean, it's close, but I'd probably go with Micah just because, I mean, he's like an all-timer. So is CD, but I think
I don't want to. Yeah, I would probably put those two at first, but I think with Dak Prescott, are we really going to give him the highest paid contract out of any quarterback at $60 million or even higher than 57? Really? What the hell has Dak done up to this point? Not much.
Well, he's gonna get that, and because I mean, you just saw guys who are less proven than him. Trevor got 55. Jordan got 55.
Tua got 53.
Tua got 53. Jared Goff got 53.
If it's not from the Cowboys, it's going to be from somebody else. But
Yeah,
if I'm the Cowboys, I'm not giving him this much money.
I mean, it depends how the season goes. I probably would wait it out just because you have to see how the playoffs go, because he really is a different quarterback in the playoffs. Besides that one Tampa game, like it really just is like it's night and day with him. But if you were just paying off the regular season, I mean, you'd have to give him like. So I'd wait it out if I was the Cowboys. He's not really holding out or anything, so you really don't have any like demand to pay him. So what I would do is I would just like I'd just wait, see how the season goes. If he plays at the same level, I'd pay him to 60. And just go from there.
Well, the last time he tried to play this out, it was 2020, and against your Giants, he fractures his ankle and he's out for the season. And you know the rest of that story. The Cowboys completely suffered as a result, and they give him the $40 million a year contract. Now, I mean, I don't even think Dak's saying he's going to play this out, and God bless him. His heart is in the right place, and I'm sure that something will get worked out eventually. But at the same time, Dak Prescott, since he got that $40 million contract, only has one playoff win, which conveniently was against Tom Brady. I'll give him that. But he hasn't been in the conference championship. He hasn't been in the Super Bowl. He chokes in the playoffs just as much as the rest of the team. So I don't really know why the Cowboys want to keep spinning that cycle where, all right, we're going to give ourselves so many expectations. We're going to give our fans a false sense that this year is going to be different and that we're going to actually finally break the curse, only for us to completely suck and choke once again. So I don't really think that the Cowboys should give him it. Who knows? Maybe the Giants will give him it next year if Daniel Jones sucks. Who knows? If it's going to be another team, I'm not saying he's not going to get another contract or at least a record-breaking contract, but you got your best defensive player and your best wide receiver looking for long-term contracts, and you're going to give Dak a second one, but for those two, or actually, you're going to give Dak a third contract before those two get their second, when Dak hasn't done much in the postseason.
I mean, I feel like the same. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a big year. I think they have to. Yeah, I think they have to go far. So
Well, it's actually a good segue. What is a successful season for the Dallas Cowboys, in your opinion?
to break the streak of the conference championship, I think anything less than that is like not successful. I think they have to make a conference championship winning. I mean, I think I would win. I mean, it's not like win the Super Bowl because I think there's better teams in the NFC. Or honestly, not really. There's probably like one or two better, but if that, I mean, so I honestly say probably get to the Super Bowl. I think getting to the Super Bowl is really what the Cowboys need to do here because the team is loaded. The team is ready. Not loaded, but like it's a good team. They have an elite quarterback. Like it's they've got to show up in the playoffs, and same goes for the head coach Mike McCarthy too. So this has got to be the year for them because it's a big one. So
I think for a successful season, you have to A, beat the 49ers, and B, get to the conference championship game. Because the 49ers are the juggernaut of that conference. And there are a couple teams that I think are better than the Cowboys. Obviously, you have the Detroit Lions. One can argue the Philadelphia Eagles just because of I can't talk. Just because the amount of talent that they have on both sides of the ball. And who knows? Maybe there would be a couple of surprise teams that will jump into the mix at the same time. But really, it's Detroit. It can be Philadelphia and San Francisco. If you're the Cowboys and you don't get to the conference championship game with all the expectations and with the amount of talent that you have on your roster, then Mike McCarthy's going to be gone. Like I said, Dak Prescott is going to walk away as a free agent. The Cowboys might not bring him back unless Jerry's that desperate. And the team's probably going through a year or two slump as a result. Maybe Trey Lance has a mediocre season for them. Who knows? But conference championship appearance. And you got to beat at least the 49ers or the Lions to get there. And even Philadelphia because they're gunning for you for that NFC East crowd. So,
yeah, I think that's fair.
yeah. We'll get into it later about where we will put the Cowboys in our division rankings. But let's head out to the Philadelphia Eagles. TJ's most hated division rival, right? As a Giants fan, do you hate the Eagles the most?
Yeah, it's either them or the Cowboys. The Cowboys and them are probably tied. I do not like either of them, so it's hard. It's like picking a favorite, or it's like picking a favorite child. I hate them both so equally that you can't even.
Oh my god.
So.
Oh my god. Yeah, you're gonna be an awesome dad, TJ. Just rooting for you. I'm rooting for you. Don't worry, he's not gonna be a dad just yet. But seriously, I'm like, damn, you're already gonna have your already thinking of the future. Dear God.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get to this Eagles talk. So last year was certainly one of the worst collapses that I've ever seen from a team that literally just went to the Super Bowl a couple years prior. Start off 10-1. It looks like you're going to repeat the same story. Top of the class. Yeah, there were a lot of weaknesses and flaws that definitely could have been exposed, especially with the secondary and some of the offensive play calling. But 10-1 is 10-1. When you're at that position, the only way you can go is up. And obviously, we've seen plenty of stories where certain other teams overachieved until they've said reality. For the Eagles, this is what they were technically supposed to do. But then the rest of the story. They finished the regular season 11-6. They go into the playoffs as the 5th seed. Their defense is trash. The offense is one-dimensional. And they predictably get destroyed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the team that Philadelphia destroyed in week 3 in that same stadium on the same stage, if you really think about it. But they definitely made a lot of changes. No more Brian Johnson. No more Sean Desai. No more Matt Patricia. You don't have to see that pencil in his head for the foreseeable future. But you got Kellen Moore running the offense, and you got Vic Fangio running the defense. So, in short, you got the Cowboys offense and the Dolphins defense. You're going to have solid victories, but you're going to have a lot of expected losses. But it still has a lot of talent, and both coaches have proven that when you have that, you're going to have a lot of success. Jalen Hurts is still one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. We're going to get into it about if he's overrated or underrated or if he's in the right spot. But this offense is going to be a lot more dynamic now with Saquon Barkley in their backfield because, yes, he's had an injury history, and, there's a lot of questions, giving him that much money for a few years. But when he's at his A game, He is one of the best running backs in all football, despite what TJ might think. With a crappy offensive line in New York, he still put up some of the best numbers in his career. And the best case scenario is that with this loaded Eagles O-line, even with Jason Kelce retired, he should have a top 3 or 5 rushing season, if he stays healthy. And with him in the backfield, that passing game is going to open up so much more with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. And, you still have that juggernaut O-line with Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson and Cam Jurgens taking over and Landon Dickerson. So this Eagles offense should still be a top 10 unit. And when Saquon Barkley, in the best case scenario, when best comes to best, this team can absolutely win the NFC East. But the big X factor is their defense, especially their secondary. There is a reason why they drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean with their two draft picks last year. Obviously, Darius Slay and James Bradbury sound good on paper, but A, they're not getting any younger. B, James Bradbury proved that he was just as bad as he was in Carolina and with the G-Med, towards the second half of his stretch with the team. So, the secondary is really the huge issue. Obviously, you still have Reed Blankenship, and I'm trying to see. Let me remember if they missed anybody, because I have the roster right here. They brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and you obviously let Kevin Byard go. So, obviously, Vic Fangio emphasizes a lot of heavy pressure and man coverage. And with that defensive line on paper, it should still be pretty sweet. It should be a lot better than what it was last year because it definitely faded down the stretch, and it's going to look a lot different now with Fletcher Cox retired. But you have Jalen Carter, you have Jordan Davis, you let Hassan Reddick go, but you replaced him with Bryce Huff. You've got Josh Sweat. Your linebacking core is decent. It's not the best. I mean, you got Zach Bond and Devin White and Nakobe Dean. But honestly, I don't think it's going to be like a top 10 unit, but I still think it should be relatively solid, maybe in the top 15, at least from my opinion. I don't know what other Eagles fans think. But listen, the winner of this division to me is not going to go 13-4 or 12-5. To me, it's either going to be 10-7 or 11-6. That's how much I think this division is wide open. We're going to get into it later, who's going to take it between the Eagles and the Cowboys. Or really, it could be the Giants or Commanders surprising them. But I think, to me, the Philadelphia Eagles are definitely – I mean, it's obvious that they're the biggest threat, but I think this is definitely a season where the Eagles can keep that streak alive where they, there's a repeat winner of that division. Because they have the talent. Their coaching is not terrible. And quite frankly, with Jalen Hurts, with that offense and, an improved Vic Fangio, running that defense, it should be good enough to win that many games. But, their playoff success will be determined because they were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and last year they were 1 and done. If things go south again, then Jeffrey Lurie might give Bill Belichick a call, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that'd be insane. I pretty much agree with everything you said. I mean, this is just a really good offense. It's like you can't even spin any other way. The defense, though, is very concerning. I think that's really where – but I love the addition of Vic Fangio, though, so you got to hope that. But, at some point, you just need to have – they have some talent, but, man, outside of Jalen Carter, there's really no one on here that's, that stands out to me, really. There's a lot of names, but a lot of guys that have really struggled the past 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah, you got Bryce Huff, you got Josh Sweat, and you got Bryce Huff, but you're just hoping that Bryce Huff doesn't prove that last year was just a one-hit wonder because we've seen plenty of guys that have had that story. Go ahead.
Totally forgot about Josh Sweat. I would put him in that conversation too because he's very underrated. But other than, I'd say, Jordan Davis has not lived up to the hype. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's coming off a big injury, but he was good with Philly. But I still don't know how he's going to be. Darius Slay and James Bradbury definitely have played their best football. They are looking like they are not, definitely get up there in age. The linebacking room is rough, I'd say. But that's not really going to make or break this team. I think with their offense, they're going to have to put up a lot of points because this defense is going to has some opportunities to get exposed by really good quarterbacks. But the offense has the ability to punch back. So I think the Eagles could be a very good team. I just get worried about their defense and I think the loss of Jason Kelsey could hurt too, but Cam Jurgens could play really well at center. So, yeah, I still think this is a good team. It's just the last year's later part of the stretch and the fact that their defense is really worrisome can be kind of what really hurts them in this division race. So, but I think I'd agree with everything you said.
All right. Well, let's talk about Jalen Hurts because last year, obviously, he was playing through injury, at least what the reports have been saying. He's had that knee issue, and he wasn't really the same towards the second half of the season. Heading into 2024, do you think Jalen Hurts is overrated, underrated, or fairly rated?
It's honestly tough to say with him because I don't even know where like the general consensus has him. I'd honestly say underrated because I've seen some things with him like where people are saying he's not even like top 10, and I think that's kind of ridiculous because I'd probably say he's like top 6 or 7 to be honest. I saw something earlier that said he's not even top half of the league, and I was like, that's kind of ridiculous. So yeah, I'd probably go underrated. Honestly, I feel like people like Jalen was still playing good football last year. He had some bad games, but like he was arguably as like he wasn't that far off of the season he had prior. Like people need to remember that. Like the first few games, the first like 11 games, like he was pretty good. Then he got hurt, and he was still like not playing terribly. I think his worst game was probably. I think his like worst games were probably against the Giants, ironically enough. But he played that collapse against the Cardinals. Like he didn't play terribly. Like the other games, he wasn't bad. It was this defense that really was bad, and the coaching was a mess. Losing Shane Steichen that's the one thing I always mentioned. Losing Shane Steichen was like the main thing for this team. The reason they had this collapse
Yeah.
because their head coach doesn't really do anything, so they lose the main part of how they operate. Shane Steichen was the mastermind, and we saw that in Indy. Like we talked about Indy earlier. So I think with Kellen Moore, who I don't love, but I think is definitely knows what he's doing, could really make Jalen back into that MVP conversation and really utilize the weapons, Saquon Barkley, all the pieces they added, and make everything cohesive again. So yeah, I love the offense, but the defense is really where I get with the Eagles. But I'd probably say Jalen is I'd say underrated.
I would definitely say he's the sixth best quarterback in my opinion because he's proven that he can pull off game-winning drives. He has the arm talent. He is incredibly athletic. Obviously, a lot of last year you could say, well, all of he did was just run the tush push and just turn the ball over a lot. Which those numbers increased both a ton, but at the same time, like he's shown that when he has a full arsenal around you, he can win you games. In the Super Bowl 2 years ago, he had that costly fumble that made or break that Super Bowl defeat. But when the game was on the line, he did everything he could. He tied the game at 35, and if it wasn't for a stupid holding penalty from James Bradbury, who knows? Maybe they could have had time to extend the game even further. So I think that Jalen Hurts, he's definitely the sixth best quarterback. He has shown that he can win you games. He's taken his team to the playoffs when he's the starting quarterback, even with a 2-6 start in his second year before Sirianni handed the play calling duties to Shane Steichen. He broke out in his third year. He kept it going in his fourth year before ultimately that collapse happened. And now it's really up to him to control his own destiny. It's not really up to, all right, it's Nick Sirianni holding him back. It's A.J. Brown being out that's holding him back. It's the defense that's holding him back. No, the only person that can decide how far he's going to go this year is Jalen Hurts because the team is built around him for him to succeed. If you're Jalen Hurts, the question you have to ask is, what's he going to do about it?
Yeah.
But let's talk about Nick Sirianni because TJ has gone on record to state that he is a terrible head coach. But explain that a little further. How would you really evaluate him?
Well, I think so. We talked about the defense with this team, like how they're the secondary are the biggest liability. I think Nick Sirianni is the biggest liability for the Eagles. I think if I honestly think if they had Bill Belichick, I would be probably higher than them by 2 wins. I just don't think he really does anything. Because every time, how am I gonna say this? every time responsibilities get taken away from him or he passes responsibilities onto someone else, the team gets better. You saw it in Jalen's first year. Passed opportunities to Shane Steichen. What do you know? The offense got better. They tapped into Jalen's rushing more, got way better. 2022 was phenomenal because Jalen took a step up, obviously MVP type season, and then that's what happens when your offensive coordinator is really good. They leave for a head coaching job, and then what do you know? Once Nick Sirianni didn't like how things were going, there was a bunch of turmoil with his offensive coordinators and defensive coordinator, and the team collapsed. And I think he kind of is again in for a free ride. The offense was loaded throughout his whole tenure. Like the offense has been loaded. He's been carried by a really good quarterback, really good receivers, and one of the best offensive lines in the past few decades. So it's like, I just don't really know what he does. I think the sooner he gets fired, probably the better for the Eagles. But yeah, and I think maybe Kellen Moore could be that because Kellen Moore has always been looking for a head coaching job, and this would be a perfect opportunity. Funny enough, in the same division as the Cowboys would be pretty crazy, but yeah, I don't think Nick Sirianni is a good head coach at all. I think a lot of people can do what he does better,
right,
probably.
Here's my neutral position on Nick Sirianni. I think he's a smart offensive mind. I think he knows what he's doing when it comes to assembling talent on that side of the ball. And I'm not going to say that he's one of the worst head coaches because he's proven that he can take his team to the playoffs. I mean, first year they pretty much overachieved. The second year they go to the Super Bowl, and then obviously last year was a totally different story. But he's proven that with the right team around him, they can win a lot of games. Having said that, when it comes to his leadership abilities and how he can galvanize troops, that can be very questioned because last year's collapse, obviously you could say the defense was terrible and that the offense just ran into a wall. But at the same time, it comes down to your coaches to keep your teams motivated. If you just remain stale and keep saying the same things over and over again, but it doesn't have a positive impact on your team, that could just tune out your whole locker room out. And I'm not reporting this. I'm just speculating. Maybe that played a part into why the Eagles completely fell apart in the final 6 to 7 games. So if things don't work out for him this year, he'll definitely get another job. It might not just be as a head coach.
Right.
And I don't know how much of a difference maker Bill Belichick is, which might sound blasphemous considering that he won 6 Super Bowls. But at the same time, it's like, what has Bill Belichick really done, outside of having Tom Brady as his quarterback for 20 years? Maybe with this type of team, he'll be able to clean up his legacy and remind everyone, no, I am the GOAT head coach. And I still think he is, but it's just at the same time, you got to really find a guy that's going to be able to create an actual culture of winning and unity and togetherness. You got to be able to have guys like Dan Campbell that will have you running through a brick wall for him and that has everybody sticking up for one another and that isn't turning against their head coach and isn't just fed up with the losing and the paranoia and the dysfunction. Bill Belichick is a hell of a defensive mind. He's the greatest head coach. He's the greatest defensive mind. Unfortunately, when it comes to your leadership, that to me is the most important part into becoming a head coach or into becoming a great one. Because even though Mike McCarthy has lasted this long with the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, you've seen the postseason results. One and done, second round exit, one and done. So that's my take on Nick Sirianni. I think he's a good coach, but I don't think he's a great one.
I mean, I don't really, the leadership thing with him, I don't mind any of the stuff he does there. I think he definitely, the players love him. I'm not denying that. I just think pure schematics of football, I'm not saying I don't think he does anything. That probably was the wrong way to put it. I don't understand what his role is there. I don't know what he specializes in because it seems like he's not good at designing offensive plays. The defense he doesn't have control of. So I'm just trying to figure out what exactly he does. So I just feel like a lot of people, he's a very replaceable head coach, is my opinion. Whether, what he's done is impressive in terms of winning. I agree. I think he's done a lot. But you can't deny that he's been successful. But I think a lot of people could achieve very similar results in the position that he's in. So that's what
I
I'll
mean,
leave it.
Devontae Adams said the same thing about Josh McDaniels in that Netflix series. He's like, yeah, we have a great relationship and I love him, but when you just say the same thing over and over and it doesn't translate into winning, it tunes you out. Well, I'm just paraphrasing because I don't know the exact quote, but it was somewhere along those lines. So
Yeah.
let's ask the same thing we said about the Cowboys. What is a successful season for the Eagles?
I mean, this is a tough one. I think not to have, basically not to repeat last year, right? Like on either side, right? Like don't start out, like just basically, like if you win, I think I expect them to win, have a winning record, in my opinion. But, maybe in terms of where they end up, maybe win a playoff game or two. I don't really see this team getting to a Super Bowl just because of the deficiencies on defense. But, I think making the playoffs, winning a few games, and proving that last year was kind of a fluke in terms of like Sirianni keeping his job and, really proving that he can be the head coach of this team for a long time. I think that's huge. I just don't see them as a Super Bowl team, so I'm not gonna say Super Bowl. I think their talent is not there, but offensively it is. I'll tell you that it definitely is. Like offensively, but the defense. I mean, you have to have a good defense to win and make the Super Bowl. You can't just rely on your offense. So they'll make the playoffs with this offense. It just or a successful season is these young defensive players really step up and the defense becomes a top 10 unit. So really depends on how you look at it. But I'd say any of those few scenarios would be a successful season for them.
Fair enough. I would say if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 years ago you were in the Super Bowl. If you can get back there this season, it'll definitely be successful because, like I said earlier, you do not have a single excuse as to why you shouldn't be there, besides maybe your secondary. Because 2 years ago, obviously it was a cakewalk path to get there, but you saw the amount of improvement and the amount of positive flashes that you saw from that team with Jalen Hurts, with A.J. Brown, with the offensive line, with the running game, even with the pass rush. Now that you have Saquon Barkley and now that you have Vic Fangio running your defense and that you kept the core around to make sure that you avoid what happened last year, you should do everything in your power to at least get back to the conference championship game. And if you can take down San Francisco at full strength, then you can definitely make it back to the Super Bowl and potentially go up against Kansas City. And if you don't go up against the Chiefs, then you should win it all. That was what I would say. It might be asking too much for some, but if you were at the same spot 2 years ago and you were a fumble away from actually winning, then yeah, I expect you to finally get over the hump.
Yep, I mean, listen, that it depends how these young guys in the defense do. They really could make it back to Super Bowl because they were just there. The team is much different than it was back then, so we just have to see how everyone develops.
All right. Now we get to the real fun of the show. We actually get to talk about the New York Giants, the fun team on Hard Knocks. TJ's favorite team that he's watched since, I don't even know when you started becoming a Giants fan, but you get the drift. Long time. I think we got to do a solo layout for this. TJ, the floor is yours.
Wow, some pressure here. This team is so interesting. Just looking at the entire, obviously I know a lot of the roster, but like just looking at it, like this team is so interesting when you think about it, just from like not looking into them, like the pieces they have, like, so, okay, I'll start last season. Last season was pretty bad, very bad. On paper, at least, like they got blown out in a lot of games against really good teams. Yeah, they beat up on some really bad teams, but it really, when you don't have a quarterback, like they had Tyrod, the offense looked better with Tyrod, but injuries to Daniel Jones, then the Tommy DeVito experiment really set this team back. And even when Daniel Jones was in, he was very bad. But Tyrod, showed that this team really is like, they just need a quarterback to operate because they have the receiving talent, in my opinion. I thought Jalen Hyatt was always open, but never got the ball, so he really didn't get the production he should have. Wan'Dale Robinson is, great route runner, really going to be a huge weapon for us this season, in my opinion. And then you add Malik Neighbors, so I think the receiving unit is huge here. And I think it is a really good unit. It's just we saw last year they don't have a quarterback. So we'll see what Drew Lock can do if Daniel Jones can at least just play like a game manager. But the biggest improved part of this team is definitely outside of getting Malik Neighbors. I think the offensive line very improved. You get John Michael Schmitz in at center for his second year. Hopefully he can play much better than he did last year, which I don't know, but you get a second-year offensive lineman, you expect it to be a little better on the interior. And you get Runyon and Illuminor. I think those are going to be two big pieces for us. I think the Giants really will be better up front, aside from Daniel Jones taking too many sacks. So this offense has definitely improved, I'd say. But, it might not even show when, your quarterback you still don't have a quarterback. So I think the offense improved, but I don't think it might not even look like it improved because of the quarterback situation. The defense, I think, is still pretty similar. Yes, you get Brian Burns, but, losing Xavier McKinney definitely hurts too because you needed a good he had a really good second half of the season last year, really just balled out. Granted, not against some not great quarterbacks, but still, he played 100% of the snaps. Like, he will be missed. Got a bag from the Packers, but that's free agency overpay. We've said that before. Really just looking for some guys to step up here. We know who Brian Burns is. Like, he should make everyone around him better. But Bobby Okereke in the middle, he had a phenomenal season last year. And then you got Micah McFadden, who's a really good role player. But you need guys like Kayvon and guys like Jason Pinnock in the secondary to step up. Isaiah Simmons, looking for him to he had some good splash plays, but be like a more consistent player, and then playing more of the snaps. And then Deontay Banks showed some promise. Want him to. So a lot of this is development. You want these young guys to develop. They have a lot of young guys. So, but the big one on defense is Dexter Lawrence. I mean, just haven't really. I mean, we've talked about him at nauseum, but he really is. I think him and Chris Jones are the top tier defensive tackles, in my opinion, combined with Quinnen Williams and players like that. Jeffrey Simmons, probably forgetting some, but I think the defense kind of stays the same in terms of what I'm expecting, because the defense was, showed they can hold their own last year, even though the numbers might not show it. But the offense, while I think improved around the quarterback situation, I think the quarterback situation is just really going to be the reason why the Giants just don't win that many games. And I think it sucks because I think the team is there, but the quarterback situation is just simply not. So I think that's what I'd say with them. It's unfortunate, but it's why the quarterback's the most important position, right? So.
Yep. And I mean, we've seen it on Hard Knocks that Joe Shane is doing everything he can to make sure that Daniel Jones doesn't have another disastrous season. Yeah, you lost Saquon Barkley and you had to replace Devin Singletary, but if you look at the rest of the team around him, I mean, it's built well enough for Daniel Jones to at least have a better season because you talked about the receivers, you talked about the O-line additions, you talked about the defense, getting Shane Bowen and making sure that they have one of the scariest pass rushes in the league and maybe a better secondary. Who knows? We'll talk about that. But, I agree with you. It's either they're going to have a decent 7 to 8 win season, maybe 9 if they're lucky, or they're just going to be held back by their quarterback play. And even their secondary, because even though they have Deontay Banks, there's a reason why PFF doesn't really have them as a top-rated secondary. So I agree with everything you say. I don't really have anything to debate with you on there. It's your team. So, I think we'll find out just how good this Giants team is because Joe Shane and Brian Dable are doing everything they can, but it's up for the players to make sure that they live up to the billing.
Yeah, I agree.
But let me ask you this. What has stuck out to you the most while watching Hard Knocks?
Okay, so I'm officially caught up. Honestly, it's crazy because there's nothing really I didn't expect, right? I feel like we heard reports about all the stuff happening, but I'm just surprised about how much they showed about how they really were trying to get a quarterback.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I don't blame them. They were picking 6 for a reason. They needed a quarterback, and obviously they didn't get one, but they wanted one bad. I think they really love Jaden Daniels.
You try to trade up with us just for you to get Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, no, I think they loved all of them. I think the top three they really loved, and then I mean, we saw in the episode, right, that they essentially were like, we get one of the three quarterbacks, or we get one of the three best weapons. That was really their main goal. And that, I mean, Malik Neighbors a good consolation prize, but as I said earlier, like you don't have the quarterback, you really don't have anything. You could have a loaded roster, but um, yeah, like Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, that's probably the worst quarterback room in the league. So uh, you're not going to win over 8 games. 8 games is like your ceiling when you have a quarterback room like that. So that's what I'd say.
So nothing surprising whatsoever or anything
Well,
like you
no,
thought
yeah,
something.
obviously the surprising things. Like I think it's cool to see how like the dynamics of scouting rooms. I think that's really cool. I think I was also
Oh yeah,
interested to
I
see
get that.
who like they were interested free agency wise. Like they were interested in some defensive players. So I was like they were considering like Christian Wilkins, Chris Jones. It was cool to see how they acquired Brian Burns. So I think there were definitely some. It
Oh
was
no, I know about the coverage. It was just I'm just talking about like the moves they made or the things that they were discussing.
there is one thing I was very interested to see how much they wanted Tyrod back. That was interesting to me because they
Yeah.
really wanted to have Tyrod back, and I was like, interesting, because it didn't seem like they want. I just think Tyrod didn't want to come back because he knew he wouldn't be the starter. Oh, and the Jets, he's probably not going to be a starter, but like I feel like I don't know. It was interesting how he was one of the first guys they called on free or made a priority to sign on free agency. So I think that was definitely an interesting one that stuck out to me. Kind of a
Yeah.
random one, but yeah, the other ones I feel like we had heard of, and but one will probably come to me eventually.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked too, just that they were that interested in him. But I wasn't surprised that John Merritt didn't want Saquon to leave. I think, a lot of fans didn't want him to leave. In a perfect world, he probably would have been back, but there's a salary cap that, you know, determines who you get to keep and who you have to let go away in free agency.
Right.
But I think in hindsight, it was definitely the right thing for them to do. Better to build around the $40 million quarterback than give a 27-year-old running back high dollar money. And not to say that Saquon Barkley isn't great, but the Giants have bigger priorities that they had to address before anything. So I agree with their thinking on that. But through these episodes, are you more hopeful about them or more cautious?
I mean, I'm definitely this season. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's not really looking too hot this season. I think cautiously, but like I know the people in charge know what they're doing, because like I think that's one thing you can say, because like the fact they were trying that hard to get a quarterback shows they know the weaknesses in this team. They know that the secondary and the edge rush need improvements. Like they know the issues. Like they're not blind. And also, it's good to see that John Mara really doesn't make much of the decisions. He expresses opinions and gets out of the way and
Steps
just pays the
back.
bills, which is
Yep.
what you want to see. So I think I'm hopeful about the operation. I think that definitely made me happy to see everything go on, but cautious in the sense like, the results really, they got what they wanted in the offseason besides the big ticket item. I think really with the Giants, just about the quarterback. I really have no issues with any of the other, because like you put an average quarterback here, like I don't even know, like you put a guy like Kirk Cousins on this team, like it's a playoff team in my opinion. The problem is their quarterback is not that. So, I mean, and listen, like Daniel Jones in 2022 really had a good season, but like 2023 for him, like not even kidding, it was probably some of the worst quarterback play I've seen.
It was just back to reality if you really
It
think
wasn't
about
even,
it.
no, it was, dude, it was worse than what he's ever put. Like even in those first 3 years, man, what he put last year was like worse, like all time bad. Like he couldn't even read the field. Like teams figured out, you take away the zone read, you take away
You take away the run,
that's
you can't do anything.
even his running, the running backs, like whatever it is, like he and take away the first read, don't let him rely on play action, like that type of stuff really, and he just wasn't accurate. It was just the weirdest thing to see that kind of fall off. But
You know what's really
yeah, man.
ironic? That Daniel Jones, he's thrown only 20 or more touchdown passes once, and that was with Pat Shermer. So it's actually kind of crazy that even with Jason Garrett and Brian Daboll, he hasn't even thrown more than 15 touchdown passes, which is pretty absurd. But speaking of Daniel Jones, say he doesn't do well coming off the injury and that the quarterback is just a freaking liability at this point. Would you sign Dak Prescott if you had the chance?
See, it's like the same thing. Like it depends how he plays this season. Like if he has a similar season to this season, yeah, like I would absolutely sign him. But if he has a similar season to 2 years ago, 2022, where he was turning the ball over way too much, I would say no. It just really depends on what type of Dak Prescott we get. So that's a tough question to answer. I'd say based on last season, yes, I absolutely would sign Dak Prescott, and I would pay $60 million for Dak Prescott because the cap's going to go up, and that's the market. So it sounds like a big number, but it really is not. And also, there's if your quarterback's good, like it devalues other positions in the roster because he's able to elevate other players. So I'd be worried about the playoffs, but I would hope that maybe a change of scenery playing in New York would maybe help that. I don't know.
I get it. I'm
So
looking at these, literally looking at the quarterback free agents for next year, and Dak Prescott is literally the only reputable name that is going to be a free agent because
yeah,
the next guys are Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett, Taylor Heineke, Andy Dalton, Drew Lock, Justin Fields, Joe Flacco, Jimmy G. Like, there are not a lot of good quarterbacks that are free agents
and
this
there's
year.
probably not going to be a lot available for trade either. So
No, so it's either Quinn Ewers or Shador if you can't get Dak Prescott. And if you can't get either of those guys, then you're stuck with Daniel Jones for a few more years. So hopefully he does well. Hopefully he does, especially with everything that he went through. So, all right. Well, now we're on to the final team, the Washington Commanders, who are once again going through another rebuilding phase. New head coach, not a new general manager. I don't think they have a new GM, right? I think it's the same one as last year. But
no, I think they did, or maybe no, yeah, maybe they got him last year. Yeah, I don't know.
No, they did. They did hire a new GM, Adam Peters. That's
Yeah.
right. So new GM, new head coach, new quarterback. How's it going to go this time? Offensively, I'm really hopeful that Jaden Daniels has a promising career. Obviously, the team around him doesn't look great, but we said the same thing about CJ Stroud, and look how he turned out. And Jaden Daniels is a Heisman winner, so the upside is there. And you saw it on the Hard Knocks with the Giants in his meetings. Like, he has the intangibles. He's got a smart IQ. He's a amazing leader, and plenty of talent, both with his arm and his legs. So the potential is there. It's just, does he have the right supporting cast around him? Because if this was 2018, this would probably be like a Pro Bowl starting team because Austin Eckler, Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson. Yeah, this is a pretty formidable team. The problem is Austin Eckler is a high mileage back. He's heading into the twilight of his career. Zach Ertz barely even played last year because of injuries and, because of his age. And really, I think if Jaden Daniels really is the answer that Washington's been expecting since RG3 and Kirk Cousins, then Terry McLaurin finally has the breakout season that he's been expecting. Jahan Dotson finally has a bigger role. The offensive line isn't the disaster that it was, in the last few years. And they're respectable. And it makes Cliff Kingsbury look like a genius and Dan Quinn a marketable head coach for the first time since his second year in Atlanta. So the problem is, though, it's just you need everything to go right. The offensive line obviously try to get better with Tyler Biadasz and drafting a tackle in the third round. But at the same time, it's just last year it completely fell apart with Sam Howell, and you're just hoping to God with Eric Bieniemy, that how do you expect you to go with Cliff Kingsbury, who didn't really have too much success at the NFL level, besides having Kyler Murray? So I think we're going to see plenty of games where they show a lot of improvements and upsides, but a lot more growing pains, a lot of bumps, but I don't think it's going to be the disaster that it was last year. I think you're getting a lot of upgrades, but it's not completely saying much when you look at last year. Defensively, though, I think one thing I know about Dan Quinn is that when he joins a team for the first time, that defense is going to be 10 times better than what it was the year before. Last year, it was dead last in a lot of statistical categories. And so this year, I'm expecting that it's at least an average unit. And they made a lot of improvements to make sure that it falls into that range. They signed Dorrance Armstrong. They signed Dante Fowler. They brought in Bobby Wagner. They brought in Frankie Louvu. They drafted Jajon Newton. So they definitely did everything they could to make those additions. The problem is, it is definitely not the Dallas Cowboys defense. You don't really have a standout edge rusher. The linebacking core is there. You saw the Seattle run defense last year. Yeah, Bobby Wagner led the whole league in tackles, but they were still one of the worst run defenses in the league. And their secondary doesn't have Trayvon Diggs or even a Stephon Gilmore because Emmanuel Forbes had a really rough rookie season, and they don't really have any other standout guys besides maybe Benjamin St-Juste, but even then, he's like
Yeah.
a pretty okay guy. So I think they're going to have a pretty rough season. I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was last year. I think they'll win about 5 to 6 games, but really it's more of an evaluation season to me. You got to be able to evaluate your biggest strengths and your biggest weaknesses, and you have to build on that for next year. In this division, it's going to be really hard because you got the Cowboys and the Eagles in your way, and even the Giants, who have proven to be Washington's biggest Achilles heel, even though I just said that the Cowboys and Eagles are the most dominant rivals. But the point is, for Washington to really overachieve, J.D. Daniels has to play at the top of his game. Dan Quinn has to turn around that defense, and everyone else around him has to really turn everything around. You have to have every single thing go right for you to have a spectacular season, or at least to have a better one than the year before.
Yeah, I'm torn with this team. I could see them. They have so much upside with this quarterback. Like Jaden Daniels really could make this a 9-win team just by himself. And I've always been a big Terry guy. Last year was kind of a disappointment, but how much of that was how much of that was him, like who knows? But they made obviously improvements to the offensive line. Tyler Biadasz is a really underrated signing. He's been great for the Cowboys. Bobby Wagner, that's going to help out the run, but Bobby Wagner definitely is not what he once was in coverage. So he had kind of a rough year last year when he was, asked to cover, but I don't think he'll be asked to do that in Dan Quinn's defense, at least how he's going to run this one. So that should be interesting. It should be interesting to see how the defense plays because that's going to be the big thing. I think their offense can score points, especially with Jay and Daniels' mobility and Cliff Kingsbury being able to use him and not be the head coach here. I love the staff. I think, Dan Quinn really I'm a fan of Dan Quinn, and I think he's going to be huge for this defense. So I think just that alone is going to make this defense an improvement. Obviously, it's hard to get much worse than last season, but I think Sam Howell took way too many sacks last year, so that made the offensive line look much worse than it was. It's really not that bad of a unit. So I think, this team's going to be much better than it was last year, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to make the playoffs, but I'm excited to watch the Commanders, especially Jaden Daniels, because I think he can. He's not in a Bryce Young type situation, in my opinion, and unless
I hope not.
Yeah, unless Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson really are just kind of regressing, which you got to hope last season they didn't. So
right. I'll say one more thing about Dan Quinn. It's pretty obvious to say this, but this is the last chance for him to prove himself as a head coach because we know how strong of a defensive mind he is, and we know that he's an outstanding defensive coordinator. But in Atlanta, his whole tenure was stained by that 28-3 choke job, and he could never recover from it. Now that he's got this fresh start in Washington, it's for him to completely clean the slate. You got an outstanding rookie quarterback. You got pieces on both sides of the ball that can really turn your whole franchise around. You don't have Dan Snyder breathing down your neck, which is an even bigger win than anything, if you really ask me. But that's my expectation for Dan Quinn. You got to be able to make sure that this defense is a lot better than what it was. Maybe not top 10, but around the 15 to 16 range. You got to make sure that You got to make sure that Jaden Daniels develops into that promising starting quarterback. And you got to be able to beat that energy booster that you have proven to be. You can't go stale. You can't afford any more setbacks, or else your head coaching career is done.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Honestly, I think we're all hopeful about Jaden Daniels. I think that, we're going to see a lot of positive flashes, but you see Cliff Kingsbury and the way he runs his offense, it's a lot of the things he did at Texas Tech and Arizona. If you have a mobile quarterback, he's going to be running outside the pocket. You're going to see a lot of zone read concepts. You're going to see him running with the football a lot. And I think defenses, especially in his division, they're going to take that away. I think you're going to see teams have it. Pretty much the team is going to say, the opposition will say, you're going to beat us with your arm. legs. How confident are you that he can be able to do that, at least in his rookie season?
Yeah, there'll be bumps in the road. I think it'll look. I don't even really have a comparison to it, but they'll try and make it easy for him to start, and then they're gonna see how he progresses. It's tough to. I think he's gonna have a really good rookie season, though. I think with what we saw last year at LSU, I think he's a really. I like Jane Daniels a lot, and I said that in the draft too. I still like Drake May over him.
Yeah, I
A
wanted
lot.
the pass. I wanted the pass to get it, but
You're right. I mean, yeah.
wasn't
I
good
mean,
enough.
I honestly like Drake May better than Jaden Daniels, and that just shows you how much I like Drake May and Caleb Williams. I think that the 1, 2, 3 quarterback, I think they're all going to be really good. History would show that doesn't happen, but I feel like Jaden Daniels is a special type of player, and really, I mean, we saw like a kind of Joe Burrow type leap with him, right? Like he really wasn't really doing well at Arizona State, and then came to LSU and really popped off with a really good receiver in Malik Neighbors, similar to Jamar Chase was for Burrow. So I'm hopeful. I think he can have success here, and he's a really fun player to watch. So I'm kind of excited.
All right. Yeah, I'm really excited for Jaden Daniels too, because again, the upside is there.
Oh yeah,
He definitely reminds me a lot of RG3 in his rookie season, where he's so unstoppable to tackle when he's out of the pocket, and his arm talent is definitely not anything to sleep at either.
no,
But we've seen a lot of other quarterbacks that have been in that same category, and they got exposed about a year or two later. So I'm hoping that Jaden Daniels follows that CJ Stroud path, where you just come out of the blue, out of nowhere, and just lead the team to the playoffs. But he's got his work cut out for him. I mean, you got a tough division. You have way bigger giants to go through in the conference. I don't think the team is assembled enough to make the postseason as of right now. And that's not to say that they won't be able to do that in the next year or two, but it's just, like I said, you need everything to go right for you.
yeah,
If you can't do that, then it's just going to be another losing season. So,
yeah, I agree.
all right, now we finally headed into the final stretch. We asked the 4 questions that we talk about with every other division. And let's start with the first one. Which team has the best offense and which has the best defense? I'll go first. I think that the Eagles have the best offense just because you got an outstanding quarterback. You got the best running game, in my opinion, because you got Saquon Barkley. You have an outstanding receiving trio. And I think you have the best offensive line, if you ask me. Even with Jason Kelce gone, it is still one of the top 5 O-lines in the league. And if you want to see the Cowboys, I won't disagree with you since, last year it was outstanding. But I think on paper it's the Eagles. But I think the Cowboys have the best defense. I don't think that's anything to debate about. I mean, maybe that'll change this season. But at the same time, I think, Micah Parsons is a freaking stud. I think Mike Zimmer going there, they're not going to get worse. I think they're going to be better stopping the run. And I think their pass rush will stay the same. Hopefully Trayvon Diggs gets healthy because I think he's been improving year after year. And Deron Bland is a ball hawk. We know how much he loves getting the ball, even though he's got coverage issues. I think Donovan Wilson is a hard hitter. Leighton Vander Esch retiring is a blow, but I think, they've got some studs that are ready to take a step up. So I think the Eagles have the best offense, but I think the Cowboys have the best defense. And if you want to flip it around, then I won't disagree.
No, I think that's pretty clear. That would be my answer too. I think the Eagles. It's a toss up between Jalen and Dak. I think I'd rank them pretty similarly. I'd probably lean. I don't know. It's a tough one for me. But so either way, they're top of the class in the division at quarterback. They have the best running back in the division. They have the best receivers in the division versus receiving room in the division, in my opinion. Again, Cowboys and Eagles are kind of tied. I like Ferguson, so him and Goddard are kind of tied. So split at tight end, offensive line, they have the best. So it's like, yeah, I think the Eagles are clearly the best offense. And then I'd probably go with them for defense, or I'd go with the Cowboys for defense simply because it just they have the best defensive player in the division. So in Mike Parsons, so and then Mike Zimmer too. Like, man, like I feel like those are probably the 2 easiest ones, in my opinion, to answer. So, yeah.
All right, this next question is actually going to be hard when you think about it, but rank the head coaches from first to last. I think we should do it like with their respective organizations because 3 of them have already been to Super Bowls, but
Fair.
Quinn and McCarthy went with different franchises. So I'll let you start off.
Okay, so with the respective organization, I like doing that. So yeah, Dan Quinn obviously would be 4 because we just haven't seen him with the Commanders yet. I think that's safe to
Yep.
say. Number 3, I'd go. I mean, I'd probably go with Sirianni. I just feel like it really is
Ooh.
hard for me to see what like. Again, it's the replaceability. Is replaceability a word? I don't know, but it's the fact that I think he's very replaceable. I think what he's acquired in terms of talent, he's kind of been
Oh my
at
gosh.
very free ride. So I think that's I'd probably go with Sirianni at 3. I mean, and then Dable I'd do it too, just because of what he's been able to do with no talent. Kind of shows. I feel like if he had that Eagles roster, he would have won that Super Bowl and won probably Super Bowl last year, in my opinion. I think just the offense, you always got to lean offensive coach. It's like the best coaches in the league are offensive guys. So I think that's part of it too. So yeah, I'd probably go Dable too. And I think McCarthy's clearly the one. I mean, to win 12 games 3 years in a row, like, I think, I think that speaks for itself. Is he perfect in the playoffs? Probably not. But and I know we're basing off this organization, but McCarthy has won a Super Bowl, so I'd go. I think Mike McCarthy's the best head coach in this division. Even though he gets
Okay.
a lot of flack, I think he is because just what he's been able to do with the Cowboys. They've
Okay.
been bad, but they've been consistent. So
All right. I'll put Dan Quinn at 4 because again, we have to see what he can do with Washington. And also, I mean, look at his Atlanta tenure. If we were even comparing it to that, it's just you had that 1 year in 2016 that you choked, and since then you haven't been able to recover. But I'll put
right,
Dan Quinn at 4. Number 3, I'll put Dable there because I know that the upside is there, and he's shown you that he could be a hell of a head coach. But again, he's heading into his 3rd year. We have to see what he can do for the foreseeable future because first year he overachieved, and the second year they took a step back. We got to be able to see if he can be able to turn around. I think he can. I think there's a lot of optimism because he's shown you that he could be a hell of a head coach. But we just have
right.
to really see it play out for ourselves. Number 2, I'll put a Mike McCarthy there because, listen, back-to-back or 3 years in a row, you have 12-5, but no conference championship appearances, no Super Bowl appearances, and really the only reason why he won a championship was because of one Aaron Rodgers. So I don't really think that.
I guess
And obviously, you were there for 2 of his MVPs, but you got a generational quarterback on your freaking team. Neighbors for Rookie of the Year. I don't think we have to disagree about that. It is a possibility.
I hope Sports Daily. I mean, yeah, we'll get into that when we talk about who's winning because he's the sidetrack. He's the X factor. If the Giants have any chance here, like it's Neighbors. So
It's up to your quarterback, but yeah. So I'll say Mike McCarthy because again, the postseason success is just not there. And then I know we literally went in about his leadership abilities, but Nick Sirianni took the Eagles to the Super Bowl. I think putting him at 3 is a little unfair. I mean, if you can get to that point, how bad of a coach are you? I know that
he's bad. I don't think he's bad.
I know why you don't like him as much because his offense. I wouldn't say his offense, but he hasn't had the leadership intangibles, and when he's had full control of an offense, he hasn't had too much success with it. But
Yeah,
at the same time, you take him to a Super Bowl, you've at least done something right.
fair.
You were a fumble away from winning. So imagine how we would have been looked at, how he'd be looked at if they actually went out on top. So
Yeah.
that's
No,
what
and
I
I
would
think
say.
no, I'll play devil's advocate, or I'll play. I'll agree with you in the one sense of like, yeah, he, we put it on the coordinators too. He does have to acquire the coordinators, so you got to give him that. Like he was able to get Steichen, so I think, and he was given Gannon, but he had to get Steichen, so it's like, I mean that you got to give him that. So I think, I'm not saying he's a bad head coach. I'm just saying like I'm interested. It's gonna be interesting to see this year, like how, how important he is to this team. So I think this list is probably subject to change, but yeah, I think this is the biggest variance we've had for sure.
Yep. All right. Here's another hard question. Who's got the best fan base? We got to rank them from best to worst. It's actually really weird when you think about it because
Yeah.
Um, it's just obviously neither of them are like considered the best fan bases. I think in terms of God, it is
Yeah, are we
so hard
talking
to look at it.
loyalty or like
Loyalty or annoyance?
okay, so annoyance, I mean, I think the Cowboys are probably the worst. So annoyance probably goes Cowboys, Eagles. I don't know. Commanders and I mean, I feel like
Giants ahead
Commanders
of
and
the
Giants fans are kind of
Commanders.
quiet, or at least not quiet, but I don't know. I feel like they don't cause many problems.
I will say this. I think the Eagles fans are the worst, in my opinion. At least like in terms of, their annoyance and in terms of, how much crap they talk because
Yeah.
at least Cowboys fans are just delusional because they think they're going to the Super Bowl every year. The Eagles fans, not only do they rub it in your face, but they're not afraid to get violent. I mean, they've trashed the
Oh,
city,
yeah.
they've booed Santa Claus, they've thrown batteries at their own players. So obviously there's that reputation. Cowboys fans are just annoying and they just think they're gonna get
Win
over
the
the
Super
hump
Bowl every
every
year.
single year. And
Yeah.
then the Giants, they have a loyal following. They're a historic franchise, and they know what they're in for. If they know they're in for a bad year, then that's what they're gonna say. If they know that they'll be good, then they won't be afraid to talk trash.
Yeah.
Because
I
when
feel
they're
like
good, like they're insufferable. And like the Commanders, they just don't feel anything because they've been through so much
yeah.
in the last
No,
25 years.
yeah, I think that's definitely the thing with the Giants. Like, they can almost be like too. I feel like some fans can almost be too realistic, and like it's almost kind of annoying. But I think when they're winning, you hear it. But when they're losing, like they acknowledge like yeah, we suck. Like so, I feel like they're kind of different than the Cowboys in that way. The some fans, but like every fan's different. But that's at
Yeah.
least the ones I've experienced for sure.
Yeah, in terms of popularity, I'd probably say Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, Commanders. If you're talking about annoyance, I'd probably say the Commanders are the least annoying because, again, they're just sad and they're broken. The Giants, when they stink, they'll admit that they stink. And when they're good, they'll be like the rest of us. They'll just
Yeah,
talk crap and won't apologize for it.
yeah,
Third, Cowboys, because they're just delusional. They think they're winning the Super Bowl every year. And the Eagles are just the angriest and most violent fan base, or one of the most violent fan bases in the world. And when they lose, we don't feel bad for them because all they're going to do is just whine and throw punches because they can't handle adversity. So that's what I
yeah.
would say.
I feel like it's a lot. I mean, there's definitely a clear divide between the Giants and the Cowboys and the Eagles and Eagles, Giants and Commanders, Eagles and Cowboys. So however you want to flip it is like, I'd agree.
Yep. All right. Now we finally got to the nitty gritty. Who is winning? Who's second? Who is third? And who is fourth? You want to start it off, TJ?
Sure, yeah. So it's tough. I'm gonna start at number 4. I, I think you have to say the Giants, man. I mean, I really,
At last?
yeah, at last. Not by a lot though. I think I think they'll still win probably 6 or 7 games. I think I don't think this team is awful. It's just when you like, man, they just do not have a quarterback. Like it sucks. Like I think Neighbors is really gonna have a really good rookie season. I think the young guys are really gonna show out, so you'll feel hopeful. But it's just man, like you have like. They don't the hard schedule too, especially at the start. So they'll maybe win some games at the end, but yeah, I think hoping for the best, obviously, and maybe Daniel Jones has a similar year to it he had 2 years ago. But yeah, I think that they're last with like probably 6 or 7 wins. I think the Commanders at 3 with about 7 or 8 wins. I really think they're going to be a better team, and I think they're going to be not a playoff team. Obviously, it's hard with 7 or 8 wins, but I think you're going to be like, dang, okay, we got something in Jaden here. Let's fix up the defense, keep Dan Quinn, and put some more receiving talent around him. We'll be good to go. So I like where the Commanders are going. I think they'll be at 3,
All
kind
right.
of probably similar to the Giants, but they'll just have like the offense upside with their quarterback. Then I have the Eagles at 2. I just really I can't get on board with their defense. I think especially with some of they play like they play some hard opponents. They play some good offenses. So like playing the Cowboys twice, like that's tough with that defense. So they really need some guys to step up. And so I'd probably say they win about 9 or 10 games. And then the Cowboys, I just think they're the most well-rounded team in the division. I think with Dak Prescott, he's shown he can win every single year. Whether they do anything in the playoffs, like that's yet to be determined, but I think they'll win probably 11, 12 games. So, yeah, it's going to be close. It's not going to be like it's within 5 wins. So I think 7 to 12 wins. Like Giants probably have 7, Cowboys have 12, and that's not really a much difference. So I go Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, Giants, and all of them, pretty similar. So.
Well, I don't disagree with the bottom two. I think the Giants will be last. I think the Commanders will be third. For all the reasons you pointed out, I think the Commanders have a lot more upside because you got Jaden Daniels, and obviously when you have a rookie quarterback, you really could head in either direction. You're either going to overachieve or nothing's going to really change, and you're just evaluating for next season. And with the Giants, you've got legitimate pieces on both sides. You just need to make sure, A, the quarterback is good, and B, your offensive line is not a travesty. C, that your secondary steps up. And D, if Devin Singletary is a good consolation prize for Saquon Barkley. But for the first two, I think that the Cowboys will be second, and I think the Eagles will be first. I think the Cowboys defense is going to be solid. I don't know about the run defense because it doesn't have a lot of size, but obviously you got Micah Parsons, you got Trayvon Diggs coming back. Mike Zimmer has proven that he can be a legit defensive coordinator. Hopefully it's not another Mike Nolan situation. And obviously your offense didn't get too worse. Obviously you lost Tony Pollard and brought back Zeke, but it's still an outstanding offense. So I think it'll still be consistent. But I think the Eagles offense, it's going to be a lot more dynamic with Saquon. Your O-line's still the same. Your passing game's still the same. Jalen Hurts is still a top 10 quarterback. And I think the defense is going to be a lot better now that Vic Fangio is calling the shots, because we've seen first and foremost that when he takes control of the defense, he could turn it around. They get a lot of pressure. They're a lot better at slowing down the pass. They're definitely better at shutting down the run. So I think that the turnaround will be there, and it's going to be a hell of a lot better than Matt Patricia, which might not be saying a whole lot, but I think the Eagles will definitely not fall into another collapse. So that's what I would say. And honestly, I don't think anybody would disagree if you had the Cowboys over the Eagles and vice versa.
Yeah,
so
I think
it's going to be one of those two.
Yeah, there's a clear divide. Like it's like the Eagles and Cowboys are fighting for the first, and like because I wouldn't be surprised the Eagles won. I'm just picking like who I think is well rounded on paper, and then the Giants and Commanders for third. And the reason I'm picking the Commanders is because I feel like their quarterback, I feel like they're just going to be way more dynamic. So that's my reasoning for it. I think the Eagles offense though could really score some points, and they'll be a problem for every team they face in the division. So I could totally see them winning it. So.
All right, before we sign off, we got the wheel, the division previews, which one we're going to do next week. So we got 4 left: the AFC East, the AFC North, the AFC West, and the NFC West. Only one more team from this conference, so pretty funny.
Wow.
But let's see what we got here.
If we get the NFC West, then we just have to go on like an AFC gauntlet then.
Oh my gosh. Let's go. Great. Yeah, AFC East. I think it's only fair. We talked about your team this week. We got to talk about mine next week. God help us all. But outside of that, I mean, it's going to be a tough quarterback division because you got Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, and Tua. So really, it's anybody's division for the taking, if you really think about it.
I agree. It's going to be interesting.
All right. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. Leave down a comment if you agree with any of our analysis on either of these teams or either of these topics that we went through. Yeah, definitely looking forward to next week because we're talking about the AFC East and the team that actually has these colors in their uniform.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next week, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your July because the Hall of Fame game's on Thursday, and that is August 1st. So we'll see you then. Peace, everyone.